There are many people, Americans, specifically in South Carolina. We just saw my partner, Ali Velshi, in the storm's path, a storm that is now a Category 3. Why on earth are we still talking about this?
Man, if I had an answer to that, I could maybe solve the world's problems. It is just the craziest, most frustrating thing, because obviously none of this matters. The fact that he was wrong about Alabama initially, any normal president could simply have said, initial reports suggested perhaps Alabama might be impacted. That's not the case. I'm glad. Now let's focus on who is really in this path, the path of this storm, and taking care of them. He's incapable of doing that. He's incapable of ever admitting error on anything, which is a psychological trait that is damaging to the presidency and obviously hurting the American people. And let's not forget that it is actually a federal crime to doctor a weather map in the way that he allegedly doctored it, with a jail term up to 90 days. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that people can be misled and resources can be misdirected. That is the real problem here. And it is a psychological, structural problem in the president that he is incapable of overcoming.
Shannon, do you agree with that? The president is just calling this the fake news media ganging up on him again. And lots of people are exhausted by that narrative. Why is this important? Why should people at home care about it?
Well, Stephanie, I think this is important because it's one more example of the White House basically doctoring evidence to fit the president's version of events or his perception of reality. I was going back, and because this seemed eerily familiar to me, that we're shown some piece of supposed evidence that doesn't seem to match any other version of reality. And I just could come up with a number of examples. Obviously, from the very first day of this administration, in this briefing room where I'm standing, when Press Secretary Sean Spicer used photos that we later learned were cropped and edited to show a bigger crowd size on the inauguration day. There was the Voter Fraud Commission that was created to back up the president's, or to attempt to back up the president's claim of 1 million illegal votes in the election that would have cost him the electoral victory. That commission marshaled a lot of resources from the government, and it ended up being disbanded without coming up with any evidence. There was the Comey wiretapping, where he requested Congress investigate this false claim. Again, sending government resources to investigate something based on a false perception of reality. And we have been told, I have been told by an administration official, that there was indeed a Sharpie that was used to make that black line on the map. That's the president is known for signing documents with the Sharpie, so I'm not surprised one would have been around. But again, it's an altered piece of evidence that was used to support his narrative that we keep seeing over and over again. I mean, the president makes repeated false claims, which have been well documented, but I think these examples take it to another level.
Congressman, you are not currently in office, but I'd love to know how Republicans view this, because this is not about whether or not Alabama is in the storm's path. The president, whether he made a mistake or lied about it, could have said, I made a mistake. Instead, he has stood by that claim, doubled down on it, and taken it further. And it's not the first or second or even 20th time we've seen this from the president. So members of the GOP, lawmakers who stand by and stand with the president time and again, has anybody called you in the last 24 hours?
Well, there's some head shaking that goes on when these things happen. And I think if Sharpiegate didn't happen, no one's talking about the fact that Alabama was included in a tweet. I think the more serious point is when you're dealing with emergency management. It's one thing when you're tweeting and it's political confrontation and Joe Biden says this, or Elizabeth Warren says this, and I'm gonna whack you back on Twitter. But when you're dealing with emergency management, national security, things of that import, you really need to reduce things to the basic facts so that local government officials are able to plan. And the thought I had was, if I am running emergency management operations in Alabama, what do I do when residents and local law enforcement officials and fire departments and ambulance services and hospitals along the coast where the Sharpie is included, what do I do when those residents call me?
Right. Yeah. No,
I don't know what you do. Do you say that's bogus, in which case that's another news story, and then you've drawn the ire of the president? Or do you say, oh, yes, it might happen, at which point in time then you need to instigate an emergency operations plan, which costs money out of local government budgets. So that's when you really drill down to it. That's where Sharpiegate really actually does have some legitimate real-world consequences on the ground.
While all of this was happening, a number of Democratic candidates were talking climate change. I want to share what candidate Pete Buttigieg had to say about the president and the altered map.
The president, he's busy drawing with a Sharpie on a hurricane map. He's completely in a different reality than the rest of us. And the problem is we don't have the luxury of debating whether this is an issue. So I can't think of anything I could ask him other than, would you please step aside and allow us to do something about this issue, because you're clearly not ready to leave.
And a reminder, the issue, he's talking climate change, not Sharpie Gate. Ben, Pete Buttigieg there is saying the president lives in an alternate reality when it comes to acknowledging and doing something about climate change. Are there many voters who are in line with the president on that?
There probably are. I mean, this is where the Democratic Party gets into a little bit of trouble if they're asking people to make massive lifestyle changes based on the threat. The Green New Deal. Not that any of these policy ideas are necessarily wrong, and that climate change is obviously an existential threat to the country and needs to be addressed in a major way. And I think Pete Buttigieg is talking about that. But it's also not incorrect to say that massive changes that require, changes in the way we use fossil fuels down to the way we use straws, that is potentially problematic for Democrats in the general election. But I think there is broad agreement in the country that something needs to be done about it. And the larger point that the congressman made about Sharpiegate is the correct one, in that if you're talking about crowd sizes and pictures and politics, that's all, we could deal with that. That's in the realm of, the usual daily craziness. This is the use of resources to protect people's lives and diverting them in ways that could be dangerous to people's lives, and leaving state officials in Alabama unaware of what to do and how to deal with the president. So that's why something like this, which sounds like another crazy Trump story, is actually very significant.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.